We just want to ask.
We're about to go. I'll let you know.
So we've got no video either.
Watching the live stream.
Oh, you need to do what NDC do during the contentious part.
Yeah, well, I have some IT issues.
I'm just come on.
We need to talk to the IT people.
Well, you've been practicing that. Right, you ready? Oh, look.
Yeah.
Melanie Carterton has got a video.
Okay, we're going live.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'd like to welcome everyone to this extraordinary meeting of the Carterton District Council. I'd like to start by acknowledging our iwi rep who's here with us today, Te Rangi Kawhiria. Welcome, and also everyone in the virtual public gallery that's joining us today. So, and I'd like to start, please, by asking Te Rangi Kawhiria, if you could start with a karakia, please. Oh, you.
Aroa mai, I was on mute. I ngā rangatira, I te koro mātua, I ngā memo te kaunihiri rohe a Taratahi. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou iho mā, kua huhu mai nei tēnei rā I raro te maru o te kahu o te amorangi. Te atua mātua tō tātou kaihanga, te atua tama tō tātou kai whakaora, te atua wairua tapu tō tātou kai whakamā. E tō mātou I te rangi hei, hei manaaki hei awhi a mātou kai mahi I roto o te kaunihiri rohe o Taratahi tēnei wā. E tautoko ana te kaupapa o te rānei, he mahi ua, he mahi maro hoki. So ho mai te manaakitanga, the wairuatanga I roto tēnei kaupapa hohonu hoki. Nā reira, e pā tēnā hoki koe, ake tōne atu, āmene. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you. So we move on to apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Auntie Mahi.
Yes, we have an apology from Auntie Mihi. Any others? I think everyone else is here. So can someone please move the apologies?
I will, Robin.
Yep. Robin's moved the apologies and a seconder.
I'll second it, Brian.
Brian seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Right. Cool. Thank you. It's carried. Conflicts of interest declaration. Are there any conflicts of interest? No conflicts of interest. Okay, thank you. Next item is public forum, and there's no one for public forum, so we'll move on. And item number 5 on the agenda is the proposed government's arrangements for Wairarapa COVID-19 recovery. And I'd like to ask Jane Davis to speak, please.
Kia ora, Greg. Thank you. So this is a report coming technically from the 3 chief executives to the 3 Wairarapa councils today. The other 2 councils met earlier on in the day, and you're the last council to consider this proposal. It's also been through the Shared Services Working Group, so Rebecca, as chair of that group, may want to add a little bit more. I'll just do a very brief sort of introduction and context. And I'm also going to get Dave just to talk briefly about what's happening in the planning stages pre putting a governance group in place. So the COVID recovery is going to be a different recovery than New Zealand's ever had to deal with before in terms of a natural event or emergency event. We're still in response mode, but we've moved into recovery mode over the last few weeks. We're not really well set up legislatively through the Civil Defence and Emergency Management legislation to deal with recovery from this type of disaster event. So we're all feeling our way just around the more formal processes and structures that might be in place in the country, and we're still waiting to hear what centrally the government might want to set up for recovery. But I think it'd be fair to say that those parts of New Zealand who have got clear plans and a clear way of advocating those plans will do better in recovery than those parts of New Zealand that don't. Hence the need for at least some form of governance arrangement, so we in Wairarapa can advocate our people's interests through to regional and central government as opportunities arise. The first question is posed in the report is, does the three councils of Wairarapa want to work together and unite to advocate for the interests and plan for the interests of Wairarapa community? So if your answer to that is yes, then the next thing is to think about what structure is in place. So what has been proposed here reflects the feedback that we got from the majority of the members of the Shared Services Working Group, which is a committee, a relatively small agile committee that can oversee and coordinate the response efforts across the Wairarapa and then advocate into central government for any resources that we might want. It would be fair to say that there's been a lot of work happening in the recovery space in Wairarapa. So Dave Margaret Baisley has led a group of business leaders and others in the private sector and public sector in Wairarapa, the economic recovery. So she's brought together a lot of influential people and is developing actions to take advantage of the situation and help our economy respond and recover. That's already happening. We've got the more formal group of officials, which Dave Gittins is leading, putting together a more formal plan of recovery. And Dave will quickly talk to that in a minute. What we don't have at the moment is an oversight of all the actions that are happening, a place to bring all those actions together in terms of integrating and advocacy, as I said. In the social wellbeing space, there probably isn't a lot of work that's seriously happening yet in Wairarapa, although nationally the various government departments are quickly trying to work out how they're going to assist New Zealand recover. Iwi probably led the way in a lot of the recovery space and certainly the response space. So Ko Wairarapa Tēnei has been brought together. That's the leadership of Iwi in the area. They have prepared a really effective and impressive response plan, and that's going to be transformed, I understand, into a recovery plan. So one of the proposals that's in the report to you is including iwi leaders, and it's hopefully or possibly going to be the leadership of Ko Wairarapa Tēnei sitting alongside the local government leaders in this committee. So we have the Māori recovery, Māori-led recovery, sitting alongside the wider Wairarapa recovery. So that's the proposal. So just on that, when South Wairarapa considered this report this morning, they've made a change, or suggested a change to the terms of reference to the committee. So they've actually adopted the recommendation. As is Masterton, South Wairarapa has adopted a change to the terms of reference for the committee, which changes the quorum. So at the moment, the recommendation is a quorum of at least one representative of each of the councils. They've added a one representative both of the iwi. So there would have to be two representatives from iwi, one from each of the two iwi to make up quorum on the committee. So I just want to note that, and Mary, you might want to just make that change as well, consider that change. Can I just hand over to Dave just to quickly talk about what's happening in the planning?
Yes, tēnā koutou katoa. The planning has been busy in the background waiting for a government's decision and arrangement so that we can put forward a scope for what covers the plan. But we've also been working in parallel at risk of rework, but for expedience to put it all together. The plan itself is a very high-level strategic document that will steer us in the right direction. It won't provide the detail, the work will come after that, but it's a very short document, but it's collated hundreds and hundreds of data points or information, people's responses that we've been working with and reaching out to provide a steer as to where we should be going as a Wairarapa strategically and how we can recover from this I guess it's the pandemic, but the economic and the social and cultural impact that this pandemic has impacted on us as a Wairarapa. If we wait for a national or a regional plan, it will be the national or regional plan won't be specific to the Wairarapa. We have on this now. There are aspects of the plan that will need further development, but we will put that out or put that to the governance committee to suggest that this goes out to the public, but we make a start and we get things rolling for recovery as it is now.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jane. Rebecca, as chair of Wairarapa Shared Services Working Group, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I think Jane sums it up really well already. Basically, some of the key things I had written down from shared services were, yes, we do want to have a combined recovery plan and a shared voice, combined voice into any regional plan, and also for any government funding that might be coming at us. Like Jane said, the work's already happening down on the ground. So our job as councils would be to bring together all those different strands and make sure that they're cohesive. From a shared services point of view, yeah, like Jane said, the basic requirements were they wanted something nimble, agile, and that can adapt along the way, and that's been noted in the terms of reference, as you'll see. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge all the members of the Shared Services Working Group. We have had different opinions, as you could imagine, but we've all been working together towards the same goal, which has been really awesome. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where this is going to head.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's a great update. Because we're in an environment where some of us are in the room and some of us are coming in via Zoom, I think I'll just go around all the elected members individually and first ask if there's you have a question before we get into discussions. So on our screen, Jill, you're at the top there. So Jill, have you got any questions?
Just a quick question about 3.4.1 for paragraph. It's on page 4. Paragraph number 5, when it says, this is for the formal committee, when it says, and I'm looking at another screen, sorry, the document, it would be slightly less accessible to the public who may wish to attend meetings of the committee. I'm really happy about this process. Something has to happen. This is a big change for all of us, the whole world, etc. So something does have to happen. It does have to be nimble, agile. But I'm just wondering that it probably does need to be really transparent as well. I'm just wondering whether or not you could think of live streaming the meetings where the decisions are being made via Facebook, which I've been following today, which has done really well for our meetings today.
Yep. No, I don't see a problem there at all. Thank you, Jill.
Yep.
Next up is Steve.
Just sorry, one other question, just on paragraph 7 of the same section, about if a new committee is created, which clearly it will be, removing other committees. So I just wondered how far that will go. So, for instance, is it envisaged that it will take a lot of other sort of additional delegations, which would be normally shared with the other committees, like shared services? Would that still need to exist with this particular committee?
Shared services will need to exist, and this is work in progress. I mean, this whole COVID-19 what we're involved with COVID-19 has been developing and is always developing, and I see the governance structure of the recovery actually developing along with that. So I'm sure common sense would prevail. I don't know, Jane, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, no, I think at the moment, if you look at the delegations and the work of this committee, it will be pretty focused on the recovery plan and the implementation of that plan. As it evolves and as we work through the next 18 months of nearly 2 years of this triennium, the committee may evolve a little bit. And so I guess the comment is really sort of leaving it open for what might happen in the future, and just a signal that we just need to make sure that we're not over-governing ourselves around structures and joint committees and joint working groups. So this was something that we're obviously always aware of. It's really easy to set up lots of committees and working groups. It's just a reminder to ourselves that actually we just need to make sure that we're reasonably streamlined and we don't have time that we can be spending actually doing other real stuff.
Is that okay, John?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Steve, any questions?
Thanks, Greg. Just on the option which is recommended, along the lines of what Jill said as well, it says it would also be publicly accountable as such. I definitely like the idea of being transparent through Facebook like we have done today with the meetings. But also look at a couple of things, the wordings, and it's got under this option, the delegations would include the authority to undertake all activities and so forth. But then as you go down, it says, however, it would always need to work with the respective governing bodies within the region, e.g. the council, etc. They kind of contradict each other. I'm not sure if you read both sentences. One says it's going to make decisions without the council's influence as such, but then the sentence further down, it says it wants to have the council's input as such. So I kind of find it a little bit conflicting in the way it comes across. I'm not sure if you share that.
Thank you, Steve. Jane, would you like to comment on that?
I guess again this is really just a commentary on making sure that this committee doesn't, one, double up on what other councils are doing or committees within the three councils. So remembering that we've got three councils involved with this and each of us do our own business through other committees and other structures. So it's really just again a signal that the committee needs to be very cognizant of what the other councils are doing, what their councils are doing. The same actually would apply to the iwi authorities, I have to say. So just making sure that this committee is doing what it needs to do. It's not contradicting what the other councils are doing and everyone's sort of working together. I think as we initially kick it off, it will be fine. I think as we go through the process of recovery, which will actually be turning into a bit of the new normal, because the recovery is actually going to be a bit transformational as well. That's when it's going to be even more important that the committee, in doing its business, is really aware of what the business of the participating councils and the iwi authorities.
Thank you, Jane. Is that a good answer for you, Steve?
Yes, thanks, Greg. That'll do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. Next on the screen there is Russell. Russell, have you got any questions?
Yeah, just one. Does this committee have a finite time, or is it ongoing until whenever? What's the plan for that?
So if I can answer that, Mayor. So it will cease to exist at the end of the triennium, but the councils can choose to stop it earlier. And then at the start of the next triennium, it will be the decision of the councils whether it re-establishes the committee or not.
Thank you, Jane. One of the key things that I've already discovered is the relationships that have already been built during this process of preparing for this, and I think those relationships will carry on not only through this form but in other forms as well. So I think that's really important to factor in. But is that a good answer for you, Russell? Yep, cool, thank you. Rob, you're next. Any questions from you?
Yeah, just a couple. I'll jump straight to the terms of reference, page 12. Standing orders, it says standing orders of Masterton District Council will apply. Are there any substantive differences between Masterton standing orders and Carterton standing orders?
No, both standing orders are based on the standard standing orders that are advised out of Local Government New Zealand. Okay, so they didn't make any changes as they're allowed to do? I was just considering that maybe it would be sensible just to reference the LGNZ standard standing orders rather than one council. But if they're essentially the same as ours, then that's not a problem. So I just wanted to raise that.
quorum, 6 members, territorial authorities, does that include Greater Wellington?
No, it doesn't. And the Shared Services Working Group had a long discussion about whether they wanted to recommend or have us recommend that the Greater Wellington local representative sits on the committee. The discussion, and Rebecca can probably add to this, but the discussion was at this stage, it's probably not necessary, but the committee should be open to inviting the regional council to appoint its member at some point in the future.
Okay, so the quorum would be 1 from each TA, 1 from each iwi, plus 1 other. Yeah, no, that works. The last questions on the previous page under delegations. The committee has authority to 1, prepare and adopt a Wairarapa COVID-19 recovery plan. Where it says adopt, so effectively you've got you've only got 2 of our members on this committee, and the plan will come with price tags and with costs attached. It just doesn't seem quite right that the committee would have the final say in adopting the plan, given that our 2 could be in a minority and outvoted by all of the other members of the committee. It seems sensible that it should come back for a final ratification by the individual councils themselves, just so that it's us that's accepting, and because we carry the can for our public expenditure and the costs and the governance over our patch, and I don't know that it's wise to delegate it quite as liberally as the way it's worded under bullet point 1. But I'm happy to be convinced otherwise. I'm not on the Shared Services Committee, so I suspect this has probably been thrashed out lots, but I'd just like a little bit of discussion around how that bit works.
From my point of view, the reason of having a formal committee like this is so you can make decisions and actually make some traction. It's a very delayed process by the time you go back, and it is about a recovery plan, and I'm sure those finer details would have to be confirmed anyway through our Carterton District Council. But Jane? Yeah.
The committee doesn't have delegation to make financial decisions on behalf of the councils. So there's nothing in the terms of reference that gives them a delegation to spend council money. So if there is anything in the plan, and I don't think the plan would get into the detail of what council's going to spend, those decisions to actually spend money will still sit with the councils, not with this committee.
Okay, that being the case, then I've got no further concerns.
Yeah, so Rob, as a recovery manager, I haven't had a governance to report to, so I haven't been able to discuss this, but it's not my role to delegate to or to instruct councils how to or what to spend. It'd be a recommendation of an action that then may need to be looked into further for potential cost things. So that's where I'd see the plan at a higher level. It won't have a detail of this will cost X.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. All good, Rob?
Yeah, no, thank you.
No, thanks, Rob. Rebecca, any questions from you?
No further questions from me, thank you.
Great, thank you. Tarangi Kauwhiria, any questions from you?
Given that we're working towards a recovery plan, I guess one of the things that was highlighted by Jane update was that there'll be some form of oversight in terms of the coordination around all these different entities that are working together, because they're operating on a number of different levels. So, I mean, probably sounds a bit confusing at this point in time, but can you talk a little bit more to that, Jane, how that's going to work in terms of coordination? Because one other further question I have is right now, in terms of the impacts, is what intel do we actually have on the economic, social, cultural and environmental impacts as we understand it today, because this plan is obviously about addressing those needs.
I can't answer absolutely because it hasn't happened yet, and as I said at the beginning, we're still feeling our way in terms of how recovery is actually going to work. But this committee, I would imagine what this committee will be doing is looking across Wairarapa, gathering not only intelligence about where we're sitting in terms of the well-being, our economy and what's happening to our people and so on, but it'll also be looking at all the different activities that are happening in the recovery space. there will be mechanisms for those different groups that are already operating to feed back and advise the committee in terms of what's happening. And that's one of the, I guess, strengths of having a formal group, is there can be some formal reporting and some structure around that reporting and structure around monitoring what's happening in Wairarapa, and therefore enabling that sort of integration and consistency. In the social wellbeing space, that is quite an unknown area at the moment. We're aware that the central government agencies are trying to work out what the part that they're going to be playing across the country and into communities like ourselves. I think we've already had some signals that there's an expectation that communities will be doing some coordination and intelligence gathering to assist central government agencies, particularly Ministry of Social Development, in terms of its allocating its resources. So we're already starting to sort of set up some structures in that space. But it is a little bit unknown, which goes to the need for this committee to be reasonably fleet of foot so it can respond and adapt to what might be happening on the ground.
Telling you, Kawhiria, just as a, that is something that has come through quite clearly in all of our conversations with the various groups around Wairarapa, is about in the social setting coordination. So that's something that needs to be addressed. The plan itself won't have a way of coordinating, but it will have a mechanism there to say this needs to be done and this is potentially how it can be done, but then it needs to go away for the work. The plan is just a direction setting, and it's very high level. The work will come after that. So there's a large amount of work that will come after we've set the direction in terms of, yes, there needs to be a coordination. So it needs to be agreed, first of all, that there needs to be a coordination. But that had to be identified as a need in the first place. And so it's a process. And then we can go through and work with the governance group as to the best way to achieve that outcome. So it's a process we're working through, keeping in mind that central government are talking as well about how they're going to do it, and we need to be able to adapt to those. There's going to be a lot of things coming through from central government and rolling out and need to be incorporated or responded to, and we need to sort of react to that rather than set in an absolute plan that doesn't allow for that to happen.
May I ask a further question? Thank you for the updates, I appreciate that. I was just wondering, do we have an instrument or tool at this stage for gathering the data that's going to equip us as we move forward, or is that still being developed?
The scope for the recovery team is developed, just hasn't been accepted from a governance group, depending on what happens today. The data gathering will, in my mind, we've already started, and because of the nature of a pandemic where we can't, where a traditional recovery would invite public in and put a lot of people together to get that to happen, we can't do that. So we've had to do it in reverse and make that up as we go along, because this is unique as far as the recent memory goes. And my idea would be that we start with a plan and then we put that out for further consultation while we start on doing some of the work that we can see as a necessary work. So it's a bit of a adaptation as we go.
Okay, thank you for that. I have one or two other questions. Am I able to ask those?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yep.
Just picking up from your update before, Rob, you talked about costs and price tags, and I've been thinking about resourcing this whole strategy and what it might look like. And I understand that resourcing is going to come from a number of different places. It'll either be council, government, or some other form of entity. And so I guess my thinking is, if resourcing has come from a number of different entities, and particularly government, and we're hoping that the government person is going to help us move forward, then I'd be strongly suggesting that those caveats within the Treaty of Waitangi, as far as our iwi partnerships would be not just recognised and acknowledged, but a bit more than consultation. So when I think about the committee makeup, I'm wondering how that might look, because what you were saying before was that, not you, Rob, but was that recommendations would be put forward and then decisions would be made by this committee. So I'm sort of a little bit wondering how that might look in in its reality and practice.
All I would say to you on that, Te Rangi Kawhiria at the moment, is we're building those relationships with Ko Warapatene, and we had a great meeting with them on Monday where we've all agreed that we're all in this together to work forward, to look forward and work together. And I think we bring those strengths through with us, and having 4 representatives at that table, I think you can feel safe that what you talk about will be addressed. Yeah. Jane?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. In fact, having the committee and the mana of the committee in terms of who the members are going to be will help in some respect, being an advocate for us getting hold of some resources that might come from elsewhere outside the councils. So the councils, none of the councils are going to have lots of resources available to support the recovery for various reasons, but they're pretty obvious. Just carrying out our own business is going to be challenging enough over the next year or so. So having a really focused group with mana that can engage with those who will be providing resources is going to be really, really important, including working alongside our 2 iwi partners for them to be getting resources into supporting their plan as well.
Yeah. And like I said before, these relationships that we're building will go right across the spectrum. They won't only be in recovery, it'll be in a lot of other aspects that we deal with in our communities. And you got another question?
No, thank you very much. Appreciate that time to have those questions answered at this stage.
Great questions, thank you. Stefan.
Thank you, Greg. No questions, just a quick comment. It's just great to see the councils work together on this, and appreciate the staff that have put effort into this paper till now. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. So now we move into the meeting room, and Robin.
I have no questions. I actually sit on the Shared Services Committee, so have thrashed out a lot of things with Rebecca and the rest of the committee members. So thank you, Jane and the other Cs, for putting this together, and Dave for doing 101 so far. That's me.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Brian?
Thanks, Greg. I really know for the questions, and most of my questions that I had written down have been answered already. I'd just like to say that I think going forward we need to have this formal joint committee and to get the decisions made quickly. It has to be of high level to me. So to me, it's a no-brainer. So I'll just leave it at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, well, we've had questions now, and just before we go into discussions on it, I'd just like to note that we put a motion forward to amend recommendation 3 in relation to quorum. So, Jane, could you read that out, please?
So the recommendation would be the Wailapa Council's agreed to the draft terms of reference attached for the Wailapa COVID-19 Response Committee with amendment to the quorum requiring 1 representative of each of the iwi to make up the quorum.
Yep, and that's what South Wairarapa passed earlier in the day. Just before we go to discussions too, I'd also like to nominate my Deputy Mayor, Rebecca McGunst, as the other Carterton District Council member to be on this governance group. But I'll open up for discussions now, and I will go around the room again and start again with you, Jill. Have you got anything you'd like to add to the discussion? You're on mute, sorry, Jill.
No more discussion. It seems pretty straightforward. I think it's something that has to be done, and whatever's the easiest way of doing it, we have to take. But I'd just like it to be as transparent as possible.
Yep. Okay, that's noted. Hey, thanks, Jill. Steve.
Nothing from me, Greg. Just appreciate the work put in by everybody to get to this point. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Russell?
I'm really not in favour of the committee having the decision-making power at the moment, so I won't be voting. I won't be supporting that part of the motion. I'd prefer to see 3.43 as the preferred option, so that'll be my only comment at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Rob?
My only discussion being that I think this is a really good step forward for the Valley, that we're building on the capital, the people capital that we've built during the pandemic so far. It sort of builds on the cooperation that we've seen evidenced through the daily EOC reports, and just community-wide. I think working together, we will be stronger and we will get through this better. So I appreciate that there's a lot of work gone into it and that there's a lot more work to go into it just to finish off the edges. But broadly, I'm in support of the concept and would support it.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Rebecca, any discussion from you?
Yeah, I think just a couple of points I'd like to make. So yeah, as councils, we are required to take the lead on recovery, and there has been a bit of discussion that's come out of shared services as well as about bringing on other members to the committee and things going forward. I'd just like to point out for maybe some of our viewers as well who aren't familiar with this process, us in the Wairarapa, we do have a bit of a unique situation where we share an emergency operations centre between 3 councils, and we are very connected here in the Wairarapa. So for us, it makes total sense to have a shared plan of attack, and I do support the committee being able to adopt the plan. I think that's important, that it doesn't end up going back to 3 councils, and that I guess possibly try to improve it for the sake of our patch. I think this committee should be looking at the whole of the Wairarapa and what's going to benefit the whole Wairarapa, and especially keep our end users in mind. So for our businesses or our community organisations, they don't want to have to deal with 3 different entities if they're working across the Wairarapa. On the note of transparency, totally agree with Jill. It'd be awesome if the meetings could be live streamed. That would have just improved the accessibility. Personally, if I'm going to be the rep on there, I'm going to make it a priority that I really bring across the view of our whole council, not just my own personal view. And I would hope that the other councillor representatives from the other councils do that as well. Sorry if you can hear my children in the background. Yeah, I think that's basically all I wanted to say. So I'll go on mute while my kids are fighting.
Thank you, Rebecca. Tauranga Kawhiria, any comment, discussion from you?
Just lastly, I just wanted to just focus a little bit on the comms strategy for this huge undertaking. And some of it's been answered in part. I keep thinking about how we're going to ensure confidence, how they ensure collaboration and transparency and progress as we're moving forward. So, Rebecca's just kindly said that, I'll make sure that I represent not just my own views, but the views of council, and obviously she'll report back diligently on that. But I just think in terms of the overall strategy around comms, because it sounds quite complex, even though we're talking about Wairarapa per se. You've got 3 different councils, you've people operating at different levels and different layers of activity going on. I'm just sort of thinking, give our constituents confidence, our communities, what might that look like? But put that aside, I just want to say awesome big ups to everybody. I total everything that's happening in terms of the overall proposal. I think that's great for Wairarapa. It's almost suggesting if we keep working collaboratively, we might end up being 1 council in the future. That's the way it's looking.
I'd like to comment on that, but I won't. Next is Stefan. Stefan, would you like to comment?
No further comments. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. And now we move back into the room again. Robin.
I have no further discussion points. I just think agile, nimble, and reiterating that the 4 wellbeings will be covered, and that Wairarapa wide, I think, is definitely the way to go, and there's a huge appetite for it. And just answering that sort of slight question on the comms, just reminding that the EOC was actually managed by all 3 councils' comms, and they shared comms on that, so very, very successfully. So I've got every faith that this will be exactly the same, and I look forward to it getting underway.
Thank you, Robin. Brian.
The only comment I'd like is just reiterate what John and Rebecca said about the transparency of the whole thing. Really good, and I'm sure that as a Wairarapa wide group with powers to operate, it should work as good as gold, and it's a way forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And my comment, I sort of echo the sentiments that have been spoken about, and just to confirm that, you know, we live in a valley that with like-minded communities, and we share the same resources, so it just makes sense that we cooperate on this like we have with the Emergency Operations Centre, and we're quite unique that we are working together. Most other councils just have their own council to deal with, whereas we're working together as three, and we're going to be better off for that. And the relationships, like I said, that we're building will make things happen a lot smoother in the future. So I'd like to move to the recommendations now. And for the benefit of those who are joining virtually, I'll read them out. And I'll get Jane to read the third one when we get to that. But the first recommendation is that the Wairarapa councils endorse developing and having in place a combined Wairarapa recovery plan and a combined governance arrangement for it. Number two, the councils establish a formal joint Wairarapa COVID-19 response committee to oversee the recovery of Wairarapa from the COVID pandemic. And number three.
So number three reads, the Wairarapa councils agree the terms of reference attached for Wairarapa COVID-19 response committee with amendment to the quorum. And then the terms of reference would read at the quorum with at least one from each territory authority and each iwi.
Thank you. And number four appoints the Mayor and Deputy Mayor Rebecca Vaguts to the committee. So can I have a mover for those, please?
So you might want to take them all separately because one of your councillors is not going to support those.
Yeah.
I'll move that, Rob.
Okay, so Rob's moved it and Robin has seconded it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Any against?
Yes, against.
Okay.
Is that one?
Hey, can we just do that again, please? All those in favour?
So you might just go around each one.
Yeah. So everyone's in favour except Russell.
So Councillor Keats, you know that that's just the first recommendation that you're voting on?
Negative, because you've taken them as four, you've read them out and they've gone as four things, so I'm voting against the whole thing.
No, it's just the first recommendation, it's not all four.
No, it's not how it's been presented. It's been presented as the four of them, so you need to redo those motions again if that's how it's going, please.
I agree. I understood that I was moving all four as a block.
Yes.
So
yes.
No problem. Just I'll go through in this new environment and we'll go through number one. The Wairarapa councils endorse developing and having in place a combined Wairarapa recovery plan and a combined governance arrangement for it. So that's been moved by Rob and seconded by Robin. All those in favour? Can you raise your hand, please? Yep.
Well, you can't see Stefan or Russell.
Yes. Yeah, could Stefan and Russell, are you able to put your screen on so we can see, please?
Oh, I can go verbal. Sorry, I can't use the screen at the moment. But yes, in favour.
And Russell?
Yeah, in favour.
In favour. So that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, number two, recommendation. The council establish a formal joint Wairarapa COVID-19 response committee to oversee the recovery of Wairarapa from the COVID pandemic. So we have a mover, moved by Brian. And please. All those in favour, raise your hand. Yep. Yeah.
In favour.
Raise it high, yeah, because it's hard to see on the screen, sorry. And Russell and Stefan?
Yep, in favour.
Against.
Against. Okay, that's 7-4, 1 against. Do you want it noted, Russell, that you're against?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And you voted for it, I assume, so take for
yeah.
Against.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and number three, which Jane will read out.
The Wairarapa councils agreed that the draft terms of reference attached for Wairarapa COVID-19 response committee with amendments to the quorum.
Okay, can we have a mover, please? Moved by Rebecca and seconded by Jill. So all those in favour, raise your hand, please. Yep, Russell and Stefan?
In favour.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain. I'll abstain from that one. Thanks.
Russell abstain. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. Okay, and number 4 appoints the Mayor and Deputy Mayor Rebecca Vagance to the committee.
I move it.
Moved by Robin and seconded by Brian. Raise your hand if you're in favour, please. Stefan and Russell?
In favour, thanks.
Favour. Russell?
I'll abstain again.
Okay, thank you. So that's carried. Well, thank you very much, everyone. So I think we've just made a decision which will go with our neighbours and will really cement the future of the Wairarapa, and especially in relation to our recovery of Wairarapa in relation to COVID-19. So thank you very much, everyone. So we'll just go back to the agenda, and I'd like to ask Te Rangi Kawhiria if you could do a closing karakia, please.
Tēnā tātou. Ngā mihi anō kia koutou I tēnei wā I tautoko ana te kaupapa nei, he kaupapa hohonu, he kaupapa mahi nui hoki, nā reira he karakia whakamutunga mō tātou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga o te warua tapu, ake, tunu atu. Amen. Kia ora.
Well, thank you, everyone, and I officially declare the meeting closed. Thank you.